Okay, can you all hear me? Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. My name's Adrian Smales. My details are on the screen. This is a presentation of kind of two halves. First half is my kind of PhD research and within health, so some of you may find this moderately alarming, depending upon how old you are and you know, your progression in life. So the other is really a look at the situation of the IT within the healthcare industry. A very brief overview. We only have half an hour, and that too is kind of alarming. Okay, not particularly great. So, for those that don't know what I do, I'm a PhD researcher in health informatics. I strap wearables to old people and watch what happens. Okay, so it's really around IoT and the next level generations of infrastructure that are needed within a healthcare environment. So a lot of that is IoT, 5G, low-powered wide area networks. So it really is looking at this very small footprint where we find it incredibly difficult to secure. There isn't a great deal of real estate in a webcam for any kind of meaningful security. It's getting better, processes are getting faster, but really we have to deal with the legacy hardware that's out there, and that's proving a challenge. This is why we have so many bots. So the title of this is Shifting Concepts. Well, actually, it's not. What is my title? That is what I've put on there. Shifting Concepts for Monitoring Frailty. I was right. So we have a bit of a change going on within healthcare. It's become less process-driven and more centric around the individual. So we see frailty as a label historically. You were frail, and we're now looking at the particular path that the individual is taking through. So a person living with frailty, it's not a label anymore, right? It's a condition, and we need to make sure that that condition is managed. Presents late in life or in crisis, delirium falls. You may have some parents that are exhibiting this right now. What we need to do, and this is where a lot of the next generational infrastructure comes in, we need to be proactive around that. Prevention is way better than cure. Historically, we've always acted on an incident. We need to get, you know, that's too late. The horse has already bolted at that point. We need to get some proactive analytics. We need to do a lot of monitoring. So this is where the next generational IoT infrastructures come in. They need to be secure. We're monitoring people's welfare, okay? We don't quite have that infrastructure yet because the devices are still relatively legacy-based, very difficult to secure. So we're looking at hospital-based episodic, disruptive and disjointed events. But what we need to do is bring the community in and around that. We have technologies now that can link people. Technology is not the barrier. Change management is the barrier, right? People are unwilling to change. And that's what we're seeing. You know, lots of legacy systems with very senior members of staff with their own fiefdoms and their own domains don't want that power base to be eroded. You know, these are things that have gone on for hundreds of years. But we need to adopt that kind of change mentality. So this is where it gets a little bit medical. Well, not really, but this tells you the Frailty cycle. And there's two particular points to this, really. If you sit in your ass all day, you're going to get weaker, right? It's just a fact. It's physics, right? And one of the issues that we see is that we do see prolonged inactivity for the elderly and the frail. They'll sit down for many hours, tens of hours a day, and that exacerbates the problem. So that increases their risk of what we call an adverse event. So this is when they will get up, walk around, be more active, but because they've got a history of inactivity, it makes them intrinsically weaker. So they are more at risk of falling over. So we can monitor that inactivity. We can associate that with an increasing risk profile dependent upon how long they are inactive for. Okay? But it's reversible. This is one of the key things, right? As long as you're living and breathing, to some extent, all this is reversible. You just need the willpower to go do it. Right? Everybody can improve, no matter what you're doing. It's just difficult and hard. Right? No one likes going to the gym and sweating sweating a lot, unless you're an Olympic athlete. And I guess they don't like it that much. But it's reversible. So the bottom there is that we need to detect when somebody is pre-frail. So this is the point when any more inactivity or any more levels of what we call homeostasis, this is the ability of the body to maintain a critical management level, right? If there's any more decrease in that, they will become dependent. All right? So the body cannot cope anymore, and it will become dependent, right? Dependent on external resources. So we did some research. I struck wearables. Unfortunately, this is patient 10. And what we can see through using wearables, that we have a particular graph that shows a particular red line. You'll see it there in the middle, where we can baseline. But what we notice is a transition. And it's being able to detect that transition from other transitions that might be highly transitory, right? They're not permanent, or at least they're not of a long-term duration. So we don't want to trigger on everything. We want to make sure that there is something there that is of interest. And the algorithms that I created allowed me to create the bottom graph, which shows that we have a window of 7 days where they were in transition, from where they were pretty stable to where the patient was unstable. And that's when they're seriously at danger to themselves. The unfortunate reality with patient 10 is that they did fall over. This was when we were just recording the data. They did fall over. They unfortunately died on the operating table because they fractured their hip. So this is a case where, had we had this technology available to us and was working properly, we would have been able to save that patient. We identified, the data there tells you that we identified the transition about 24 days before the patient fell over. So it's really important that we have infrastructures around us that can transport and that can collect this kind of data from individuals that are vulnerable. Okay, so we deployed this in Lawburn Housing Association. They had 5 sheltered housing complexes. We chose the second largest because it had a number of significant fallers. But what we did over a 6-month period, we logged them all. And the other 4 were kind of the base line. And what we found was that monitoring this, that there was, unsurprisingly, falls and incidents within the other 4. But the one that we deployed this solution into, there weren't any. Not one. And actually, this is old data. Today, a year on, more than a year on, there still has been no falls in Sheltered Housing Development 5. And they continue to be fallers within the other housing complexes. So it is possible to create infrastructure and environments to help and protect people within a healthcare environment, within a home environment. But we need the infrastructure to be able to manage that. So there are 3 domains, really, that we need to look at. And some of the examples of use cases are there. So we want to monitor the person, okay? Because it's imperative that we can collect data around them. We want to monitor the home because that's where the person lives. That's their environment. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. We also want to monitor the external environment, outside. Because temperature fluctuation, air quality, but also the technologies that extend the range of those sensor monitoring systems, low-powered wide area networks, they will be here very shortly. I have one on my garage right now. Actually, I have 2. Anybody know Boston Networks? Any hands? Boston Networks? Yeah, I have one of their LoRaWAN gateways on top of my garage. I also have a Sigfox one right next to it. So it's important that we experiment and we use these devices, okay, to enhance these particular individuals, okay, because it's all about quality of life, really. So this is for you guys, because I know how hard you work, right? So there is research around sleep. Who doesn't sleep very well? Okay, middle-aged guys, few women. This doesn't. If you read the last line of the quote, you'll see why it doesn't really refer to women very much. But it is true. You can read that, right? Oh yeah, you can read that. So what the research says is 8 hours, right? Plus or minus 2 hours for clinical issues, right? If you persistently sleep less than 6 hours or more than 10 hours, you're at risk. I don't mean that lightly, right? This suggests that you have a statistical chance of dying early if you do that regularly, okay? It's been known for a long time. And also, as it says there, it will shrink your testicles. So those that are concerned about that, get more sleep, all right? Or sleep 8 hours. I don't think for any of us sleeping longer is the problem, right? Having no sleep or sleeping less than 8 hours is probably the problem. So there's an interesting side to this. Who does exercise? Who exercises regularly? Excellent. Okay. I'm going to ask you a question. Who knows when you exercise, how does that weight, how does that fat or cellulite, whatever, there's no such thing as cellulite, but how does that weight that you exercise, how do we burn that off? How do we get rid of that excess weight? How does the body get rid of that? Does anybody know? Breathing. Okay, yes, that is correct. We breathe out, we turn it into carbon dioxide. Okay? Do you know how much carbon dioxide we breathe out a day, typically? No? Anybody? About 2 pounds, about a kilo. So but this is the thing. You can't just stand there and go, okay, I'm going to lose weight, and then start to breathe heavily. Don't work like that. Your body needs to burn the energy to create the carbon dioxide. You need to use that. You need to break it down so that your lungs will expel that carbon dioxide. So you need to put the work in. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Okay? But what does that carbon dioxide do in environments? Okay? If you're in your office, what is that carbon dioxide doing? Not any good, actually. Most offices, right, will have around about 1,000 parts per million or more, typically, depending upon your air conditioning. You will lose about 25% of your cognitive function with 1,000 parts per million of CO2 in the air. Right? So if there's 4 of you, that's pretty much the equivalent of 1 person in cognitive ability. So you can improve the work output, right, of your staff by monitoring the air quality and making sure it doesn't rise to above 1,000 parts per million. And it's true. There's lots of studies on this. One of the big issues is it's probably easier to create child attainment, to improve child attainment in schools by improving the air quality. Because it will give the kids that much more capability and cognitive output than they currently have. Right? We don't monitor CO2 anywhere that I'm aware of regularly. So if you translate this to the elderly and frail, okay, or people that have moderate dementia, they need all the faculty they can get. But if they're stuck in a stuffy house, right, where there is lots of CO2, they're going to get progressively worse. Not because their dementia is being particularly bad, but because of the environment that they're sitting in. So we need to monitor these things. We don't currently, but we absolutely have to. And this really is then the proliferation of more devices that you need to connect into your environment. So we get on to then the wearable challenge, cost versus performance. Things are getting better, technology is getting smaller. We have more capable devices. Apple, you may already know, FDA had got FDA clearance for their Apple Watch 4 for two particular things. Now, we need to make the distinction. This is not FDA approval. This is simply FDA clearance. Okay? FDA approval is for class 3 devices, right? So that's your heart monitor that you would be given by your GP or the hospital, right? What FDA clearance means is it's a lower grade device, less stringent requirements. But it's still a great thing that they're doing. But this will progress. More people who build these devices will be putting forward their clearances to get medical devices within wearables. It's a trend. It won't stop. So we need to be ready for that kind of stuff. We need to be able to manage the provenance of these devices. We need to be able to manage the data from these devices. And we need separate data stores where the individual can log and manage these things themselves. We need to push the data back to the individual so they have control of this. Currently, that's very difficult. The NHS don't consider your data to be your data, it's their data. It's your data, they just haven't realised it yet. So the mechanisms around this have to change. So this is, unfortunately, a little bit of a slide. So this is where we look at the kind of landscape around mobile devices, because a lot of this stuff will be connected to mobile. This is the Mobile Security Index, as you can read, this year. If you read the stats, it's pretty alarming, actually. 5 of 6, 83% of respondents said their organisation was at risk of a mobile threat. I'd like to know why the other percentage that's missing off there aren't at risk of a mobile threat. What are they doing? I would suggest everybody is at risk of a mobile threat. Right? You just are. 2/3, 67% of organisations said they are less confident about their security of their mobile assets than other devices. Overconfidence is probably the rest of their downfall, right? You can't secure mobile devices to 100%. There's no such thing as 100% security, right? Almost 48% said they had sacrificed security to get the job done. The other 52% probably haven't done the job, right? They haven't got round to it yet. They're fighting other fighters. I mean, this is really quite alarming, because the statistics are really quite high across the board for pretty much all of this. I mean, which tells you the state of play is quite alarming, right? Organisations and companies are having a very difficult and tough time managing and securing devices. It's the nature of this, right? Moving closer to the healthcare sector, Forescout, this is a relatively new piece of reporting, May the 15th this year. So what's the composition of medical networks? They looked at quite a number, I think something like 600. Traditional computing devices, 53%, right? IoT devices, 39%, 40%. This is a growing number. This is a trend, right? They consider IoT devices, the network printers, tablets, smart TVs and things, voice over IP, telephony. Then you have the medical systems, the OT systems, 8%. On a medical network, I would have expected that percentage to be a lot higher, actually. But it's not. It's a traditional network with a few medical devices. right? There's nothing special, really, about a healthcare network. But this is what they also found. Okay, 71%, and this is really tragic. 71% of Windows devices within these healthcare deployments are running Windows 7, 2008 Windows Mobile. I mean, we've just had WannaCry, and you would think this would have changed, but it hasn't. 30% of healthcare deployments had 100 or more device vendors. There is no consistency. This is a nightmare scenario for any IT manager to try and manage that amount of difference in kit, because each particular device will need its own solution, right? So the proliferation of devices on networks, not necessarily a great thing unless you can corral them into types and manage those. 85% of devices on medical networks running Windows OS had SMB protocol turned on. I mean, you are just asking for trouble. I mean, and you know, in any normal network, you would consider that to be really bad, right? Because you are just creating one of the biggest doors for anybody who wants to attack you. That surface is huge. So Kaspersky, this is Q3 2008. WannaCry is still active and reportedly responsible for 30% of all ransomware attacks worldwide still. Right? So it's a problem. And we've just had a massive issue within healthcare, and they don't seem to be learning the lessons that history has taught them. I mean, that's negligent. You need to fix it. I understand there's cost and there's time involved, but still, this is a critical infrastructure. You go to hospital, you expect it to work, right? If that infrastructure is not there, how much disruption did that cause? I mean, it closed places down. It was that bad. Yet we still see that it's still out there because people are not doing what they're supposed to. Right, Amy's research estimates that 60% of organisations in the manufacturing industry and 40% of healthcare experienced a WannaCry attack within the last 6 months. And there's no wonder if they still have all of that legacy hardware and they're not taking the most simplest of precautions. So this is a harrowing issue within healthcare. So what I've tried to do is really paint a bit of a picture about how technology is progressing into these in this field, but how healthcare itself is not able to cope with the change and the demands that are placed upon it. And this could be a number of reasons, right? I mean, the reasons are the old ones, change management. They just have a very different focus. I come from industry. If I was in a manufacturing environment and my manager or the MD came to me and said, how are you protecting my kit? I would be able to reel off a list of stuff that I was doing to mitigate risk. But it seems to be acceptable that we run on legacy hardware, old machines, with nobody seemingly in charge. Now that may be harsh, but the statistics are out there for everybody to kind of read. You know, and that's the issue. And that I don't really have any kind of, there's no extra slide after, I don't think so at least. I don't think there's, you know, no, there's no you know, slide where I try and suggest fixes, because they're out there for everybody to read. The problem is that they're just not being followed. The apathy around the healthcare industry is huge. So this one hasn't really been a pleasant presentation, but what I wanted to try and do is, if you have opportunities for helping your brothers within, or you might work in a healthcare environment, then there are things that need to be done, which clearly are still a challenge today. So, thank you very much. Any questions? I don't get to throw a cube at anyone. No questions? Okay, fantastic. So, up next we have Carrie Hendricks. Hey, welcome Carrie.